CARs. Okay, there's going to be classes that Gov Hutchinson is going to be teaching for the remainder of the year. I think the next one, I think it starts, his program starts in next month in August. And I think SCORE is hosting Gov for a class. I don't have the date in front of me, but towards the end of August, there's the first CAR official class. The contract, the new revision is out in terms of it's done, revisions are done, and it's going to be rolled out in December with the rest of the new additions and new addendums and along those lines. So anyway, so when you see a Gov Hutchinson class on the new RPA, Santa Cruz is going to have it, Silvar is going to have it, SCORE is going to have it. Take advantage of taking his class. We'll be doing this. We'll be ramping up towards October, November, and December with the new purchase agreement. But it's always great to get Gov's insight. Now his class is going to be probably about 4 hours, I think, and I just can't do it that short of a time. So he does really well in getting the time element. So anyway, so we're going to be talking about the RPA, the revision that was done in December of 2018. And again, this will be the form that we'll be using till the December rollout, that when CAR does their rollout of the new thing. So with that being said, I'm going to teach this class based on that you have the paper form in front of you and you're going to be filling it out. It's easier when you're online using the zip forms, and you'll be able to, a lot of things are auto-populated for you. So, but that's, sometimes you need to know how to fill it out and let the computer work for you later on. But you have to get the knowledge of what goes in, what part, and what you need to do. So with that being said, is there anything, now does my Zoomers, can they talk? Right?
Understand it, yeah.
Is there any thing that you want me to cover, something that's a concern to you about the RPA contract that we can make sure that I cover? Nothing? Come on, guys. Give me something. The class is over. We're done. Okay.
Maybe escalation clause?
Okay, that's not on this contract, but let's make sure we cover it. We'll cover it tomorrow, okay? What else on this contract?
Just on this form or in general?
For the purchase agreement. Well, I mean, okay. We can talk about my tomatoes that are not growing that well, or
in general, since I only sell 1 or 2 houses a year, where are we with the COVID forms?
the real estate industry basically is now, you remember what we did February of 2020 regarding COVID?
Yeah.
We did nothing.
Yeah.
So that's where we are at now. Everything, all the forms of COVID are gone. There are no forms that we're using of COVID. There are no requirements unless the seller is placing demands on how he wants to show his house. The normal way of showing houses just pre-COVID.
I think we all deserve an applause for that. Good. Okay. Thank you very much.
We fought through it, but I'll tell you what, the sacrifices we made with writing the PEDs and all that, you know what? Sometimes to be able to conduct our business, it was worth keeping up with all those PEDs and
agreed
dealing with all that. But yeah, everything regarding PEDs, the forms, what's put, what needs to be posted outside the listing, it's all gone. Okay. Any other questions before we start getting into this RPA? Okay, let's get started. Again, I'm going to be treating this like we are hand filling it out, and we're not using the zip forms. Now we know when we go online using CAR.org, using the transaction and using zip forms or whatever the latest version is called, there's a cover sheet where you could fill in a lot of the information. And then when the RPA, you get the RPA, a lot of it is already pre-populated, like buyer, seller, address, and all that. But we're gonna treat this on page 1, like we have right here. How do we fill it out? Okay. So basically, this is page 1 of the RPA, and the first thing you see is the date prepared. That's simply for a reference check, and you put down whatever date that you're writing this form. So today it's what, the 15th? You'd put July 15th. It's not the start of escrow. It's not anything, and it has no reference other than just it's a reference point of a date. And you put the date that you're writing this contract up. That would be the date. This offer is from, I had to put a name down because I couldn't print this form out without a name. So the zip forms allows 2 buyers. If you need to put more than 2 buyers in there, you would use an additional signature addendum. But in this case, I just have 1 person. Doesn't matter if we have 1, 2, 3, or 4 buyers in the offer. How many buyers do we need to have in this contract to make it valid?
1.
You only need 1. But, and the husband and wife, do we always have 2? What's it? Why not? What's the underlying reason as to who's on this contract?
The one on the loan.
The one on the loan. Whoever's on the loan needs to be on this contract.
And title?
Hello?
And title?
I'm sorry, for who? No, you can have 1 person on the real estate contract, but you could have more than 1 person on title of buying the property.
Okay.
Okay, so the important thing is you talk to your lender as to what needs to happen, because you're working with your lender. Hopefully you're working with your lender before you're writing up the offer, right? He's your power partner. He or she is your power partner. So sometimes having a husband and wife on the contract hurts the couple in terms of getting the loan. One person might have great credit, the other person have bad credit, so you don't want them on the purchase agreement. So talk to your lender, but in most cases, a couple would be both on the deal, but you need to talk to your lender about that. So the people go on the buyer's side. Alternatively, what about a seller? Can we just have 1 seller sign the purchase agreement?
No.
How many do we need? 2?
All.
We need all. So 1 to buy, all to sell. That's kind of the what you need to be thinking about. Okay. So, all right. So the real property that's to be acquired this is where you put your 123 Main Street. You put your address, situated in the next line. The blank would be the city, then the county, and then the zip code. You could put your APN number down also as well. Where do you find the APN number? Like anywhere else writing this offer, the MLS listing will have all the information that you really need to know. It's right on the MLS listing. On the MLS, it'll have that information. Do you need the APN number in there? No, but it's a blank. It's a blank that you have the information. Why not look professional? So, all right, so you got that. The purchase price offered this is where you would write the wording of the purchase price. ONEMILLION, 1 million. And then next to the dollar sign would be the numerical. Again, if you're on zip forms, writing up the contract on the computer, you put your numeric numbers in and it automatically will spit out the wording on that. Okay? And then close of escrow shall occur on, you have two choices here, two blanks, either on a specific date or the other box is blank days after acceptance. I don't care which one you use, just you can only check one box. So either you're going to give a specific date or you're going to give the how many days after acceptance. Now, if you put down a specific date, it's going to close on July 31st. That's fine. You write up your offer. You know, let's be realistic. Let's do a 30-day close of escrow, okay? So right now it's July 15th, August 15th. I'm hoping that's not I'm hoping that's a legitimate day that I would be wanting to close. What day is that?
Sunday.
Okay, so let's go with my favorite day of Friday the 13th. All right, so August 13th, we're going to close escrow. Now, which is fine. And I'll ask the next question as what days of the week do we like having close of escrow dates? What days of the week don't we? Start thinking about that. But I have a close of escrow date shall occur on August 13th, which is fine and dandy. Plenty of time for the lender to get the loan, plenty of time, everyone's all set. However, what if I'm in negotiations? I write up the offer, present the offer to the seller. Seller sits on it for 3 days. The seller responds with a counteroffer that's way out of whack. He gives it to the buyer. Buyer sits on it for 3 days. Back and forth, there's 2 weeks worth of negotiations and no one addressed the close of escrow date. When is the scheduled close of escrow date now? Nothing's changed. It's still August 13th. So if we finalize the contract on August 1st and we haven't addressed extending the escrow period, you're probably not going to be able to perform on time. So you need to, in the course of the counter offers, you need to address the close of escrow date. And in the negotiations, if it's going to be long or short, you just adjust with that. That's the only caveat that I see to having a date, a date specific on the contract. Just make sure that your logistics works for your negotiations.
Yeah, so you can't put August 13th or 20 days.
No, it's one or the other. Yeah, the technology won't allow you to do that. Now, you could in writing, but then you're not, then it's not correct because you've got two different instructions there. Yeah.
So in that case, it would be better to have like 30 days after acceptance?
Well, let's talk about that. And that's fine too. So the other option is the close of escrow date. You leave the first blank and then you go with, or check the box 30 days after acceptance. That's fine. However, we don't know when the acceptance is going to be. Remember I asked the question earlier, what days of the week do we not like to have a close of escrow? So what days of the week do we not like to have the close of escrow date? Weekends. Why?
Because nobody's open.
Well, I don't
Well,
care.
I mean, not open, but. it's
No,
open to-
you're right. Stop it. You're right. No one's open. I don't care about no one's open. What I care about is that the county recorder's office. So if the county recorder's office is closed, there's not going to be a close of
You
escrow.
also have to remember holidays too.
Good one. All right.
I used
So.
to work as a paralegal, sorry.
All right, no, hey, that's great. So the days of the week that are not good to have a close of escrow date are Saturdays, Sundays, and legal holidays. And so what I do the first of the year is I go to my favorite title, my escrow officer or my escrow rep, and I get the holidays. And I get the holidays, not the US holidays, not just the state holidays, but I ask for if I do primarily my business in Santa Clara County and Santa Cruz County, I'm going to get the county holidays. There are some holidays that are county holidays that aren't state holidays. So, and same way nationwide. So I get that all on my calendar, so I know what days are not good days for a close of escrow date. So the other day I don't like is are Mondays. Anyone want to take a stab? I don't like Mondays anyway. I call them the scary Sundays, because Mondays comes every week. But why would you want to avoid Mondays?
Because you would fund on Friday and then your buyer would pay interest on Saturday and Sunday.
Yeah. So what happens is we're not always positive that we can get a special recording done with the county for an afternoon recording. And if it's a morning recording, the title company wants the money in 1 day prior to close of escrow for a morning recording. And just as Rob said, if the bank is releasing the money, most of the banks charge interest the minute they release the money. And so your buyer will be paying interest over the weekend and not having the use of the house. So that's why I like a Tuesday to Friday close. But, I've closed this year Mondays without any problems, luckily enough, because we were able to get the funding in Monday morning and the recording Monday afternoon. But don't count on that with the county. The county has been a little not difficult, but you always can't rely on them, especially when COVID was hitting. Anyone experience I'll tell you, Alameda County Recorder's Office there were properties that were scheduled that the title companies went to the recorder's office on a Tuesday, and they didn't get recorded until Friday because of the COVID, because of staffing of that. So you talk about some problems there. People are having to pay interest. Seller wants to get their money. Buyer wants to move in. Everyone's cooperating except the recorder's office. So that made for some strange conversations. So anyway, so back to the date. So either one works. Whatever you feel comfortable, that's what you do. Just make sure that if you use the second one, that after you get the acceptance, then you count the days to make sure that it falls on a Tuesday to Friday. And if it's not, then the first thing I would do is I would talk to the other agent and say, look, we have a close of escrow scheduled for Sunday. Are we okay to try to make it for Friday? And not try to make it, okay to make it for Friday, and follow up with, and what would be the correction to change the date? What would we use? An addendum. So that's the way to work it. So either date works. Any questions on that? Okay. And then the last thing on paragraph 1 is that the buyers and sellers are the parties to the contract. The brokers are not parties to this agreement. And why do you think the CAR, or the California Association of Realtors, added that? What's the benefit for us as realtors, since we're the ones that are writing up the contract? It eliminates about half of the lawsuits that are out there. And the reason being is that parties that are not a party, people that are not a party to the contract, the person that is suing has to use their own legal funds in order to sue against the other party. If we were parties, which we were in the past, we have enough legal action to start with, and being a party to the contract would make it even more prevalent. Okay. Any questions on paragraph 1? All right, agency. I've said this in my classes before. The number 1 paragraph that I correct when I'm doing file review that has mistakes is paragraph 2. It doesn't make any sense, but I'm going to tell you that's clearly out of the issues. I would say that half of the quote unquote problem contracts are a result of the agency. And what makes it a problem? What makes it a mistake? If something's left blank, that's a mistake. Or if something is, of course, if something is done wrong, filled out, there's mistakes in that regard too. So let's go over this first. So each party acknowledged that there's a disclosure regarding real estate agency relationship. That's one that says on there that the seller's agents to do this, buyer's agents to do this, agent representing both parties needs to do this. So it's just kind of filling out the agency and what everyone's responsibility is. Then the next thing is the confirmation. Now understand, the reason I flip out on these when they're wrong or incomplete is because there's case law when things were not completed or filled out incorrectly, sellers have decided that since the agency was not correct, they decided not to pay commission and they've won in court. So, I mean, if you don't care about getting compensated for doing a real estate transaction, I guess you don't have to worry about this. But my job is to make sure that if it's wrong, then you correct it. And let's go through this and we'll go line by line. The first step is for the confirmation of agency. The first thing that you see is the blank, seller's brokerage firm. Now that's, you fill in the company that you work for. Keller Williams Realty / Silicon Valley, Keller Williams Realty, San Jose Gateway, Keller Williams Realty, Santa Cruz. If you are the listing agent, that's where this would go. If it's another company, you'd fill in the company that is where the listing agent works for. So that's the first blank. Next to that is the license number of the brokerage. Okay, the brokerage has a license number just like you have. Okay, so the brokerage number will go in here. And where do we find all this information? MLS again. Amazing. All right, so you got that. Now you have the seller's agent right below that and the same stuff. You fill in the name of the seller's agent. Oh, I forgot something. So I'm missing. You got to check the box. Is it the seller's brokerage firm represents the seller or represents both the buyer and the seller? You got to check the box. So 3 things on each: seller's brokerage, seller's agent, buyer's brokerage, buyer's agent. There are 3 things that you need to fill out for each representative agent or firm. Yes.
If someone from our office in Campbell is doing a transaction with our office in Santa Cruz, even though we have the same broker and ownership similar, is that dual agent or is it not because it's 2 separate offices?
2 separate companies,
Okay.
2 separate license numbers, and it is not dual agency. The only time there's dual agency is, well, obviously, if you yourself as an individual represent the buyer and the seller, that's dual agency. The Department of Real Estate views dual agency even expands upon that. And that is someone from your office represents the other party. That is considered dual agency. So someone from your office that represents the buyer, you represent the seller. What do we got? Dual agency. If someone from an office, say Santa Cruz, represents one party and San Jose Gateway represents another party, what do we have? No dual agency. Individuals. Okay. Let's branch on to that. What about someone from listing is in KW Palo Alto and you represent the buyer? Do we have dual agency here? No, even though it's Keller Williams' office, it is not dual agency. Okay. Yeah.
Mike, you said that the brokerage firm would be Keller Williams, but the license number would be your broker license. correct?
No, each office has their own license number.
Okay.
I have my own license just like you do,
Right?
but there's a brokerage, the company has a brokerage license. Yes,
So as long as the license numbers are not same, it is not your agency, is that?
that's a good way of looking at it. Well, you're talking about for the company, right?
Yes.
Yes, that would be that. Yeah. Okay. All right, let's move on. Guys, I only go over this because, you know, it's proven, there's proven law that gets a seller from having to pay a commission over a missed box. That's all it takes. So when you get my little love letter, when I'm going over the compliance and I say, we need a confirmation agency because incomplete, what you need to do immediately, sooner the better, go on Win Forms or Zip Forms. There's a form, an individual form that says confirmation of agency. Fill it out correctly, get all the parties to sign and agree to it, put it in the file, we're set. Okay? There's so many more complicated things in real estate when selling real estate. This should not be complicated, right? This should be an easy part. There's other parts that you know stump me, and I've been doing this a long time, probably more than you guys have. So let's not worry about these little picayune stuff. Okay, just make sure you get it done. Okay, so we cover all that, and then the last thing in paragraph 2 is that there'll be a form that says possible representative of more than one buyer or one seller, and that will be attached. And what it says is that companies can represent more than one seller or one buyer at a time. Notice what I said. Companies will be representing more than one seller, one buyer at a time. You as an individual agent can represent different sellers. You can represent different buyers. The only thing is don't represent 2 buyers on one house. That's a no-no. This form is not giving you the green light to do that. You have a fiduciary duty to your buyer. And as a fiduciary duty, you can't represent more than one buyer on one specific property. Okay? So does it happen that people are caught in that situation? Yeah, especially if you have an open house that 2 buyers want, they say, I want you to write up an offer for me. You can't do that. What can you do? Anybody have any suggestions? Pick the horse you want to ride to the finish line, and the other one, you refer it out to someone else. Okay?
I'm gonna keep it up to you, right?
You can, if you want, sure. I think that's totally reasonable.
I'm somebody in the office.
Sure. Okay? But just don't write up 2 offers. I've had listings where I've gotten multiple offers and I'm looking through it, I go, that name looked familiar. And sure enough, it was an agent that was representing 2 buyers and wrote 2 offers. That's a no-no. That can get someone in trouble, not by me, but a buyer might not be happy. Okay. Are we squared away in paragraph 2? We are just ripping through this stuff. Okay. Remember I said the most mistakes are in paragraph 2? Well, pretty close. Well, not close. The other types of mistakes that I see are sometimes in paragraph 3. But and I don't know if it's because we need to fill out information or not. I don't know why, but not everything's automatically auto-populated with these things. So, all right, let's talk about paragraph 3 as the financing terms. Basically, what it's doing, it's taking paragraph 1, which is the purchase price, and dividing it up into the deposits, the loan, and the down payment. That all those 3 equal the purchase price. So this paragraph 3 kind of just separates what the purchase price into those 3 categories. So let's start off on the top of paragraph 3. First thing it says is that the buyer represents that the funds are good funds. The deposits are going to be good. Kind of is a bummer to start off the deal with the buyer bouncing a check if you're using a check. So anyway, so that's that. The paragraph 3A talks about how the deposit is going to be made and when it's going to be made and for how much. So the initial deposit. Here's one for you. Let's forget about what it says there. Do we need an initial deposit to have a valid contract? If I put 0 down as initial deposit, is that acceptable or not acceptable? Okay, who says it's acceptable? Who says it's not acceptable? How about my Zoomies? What do we got there? Acceptable? Not acceptable. Let me take the argument. You need consideration to have a valid contract, right? Okay, that's all I'm going to say. Anyone want to change their mind about deposits?
I think
That's a
it is required,
What's required?
the deposit.
Okay, I'm sorry I brought this up. The answer is you were right the first time. You don't need a deposit to have,
You don't?
you don't have a deposit to have a valid contract.
Because
There's-
there is no
I-
option on that.
The only reason I brought it up is there was an argument recently where an attorney said, no, it wasn't an attorney, a broker said, I don't need, this contract isn't valid. We're not doing this because the buyer never brought in his deposit, so there's no consideration. And that's not true. The contract itself is the consideration to have a valid contract. So anyway, that's, I just went off the rails on that, but I'm back. But it's a good thing to just know that if you ever, anyone says, well, we don't have a deposit, we don't have a valid contract because we don't have consideration, you heard it here, and just say, no, Mike said that's a bunch of BS. And just take that to the bank.
Have you ever received an offer without a deposit?
Can you receive an offer without a deposit? Yes, you can. I mean, it would say 0.
Have you ever received an offer in the history of your career?
All right, the truth and honesty is, I just did a contract yesterday, but it involved my aunt and her business partner. And it was just buying out the other half of the party. So there was no deposit. Valid contract though, but it said zero in deposits, and it was 0 loan. It was just all cash. Valid contract. And enforceable. Okay, let's go back to paragraph 3A. So deposit shall be in the amount of blank. What do we like to see for deposits? Yes, but can it be less? Yeah, it could be anything. The problem is, in this day and age, it's a seller's market, so you get to see usually more than years ago, when it was a buyer's market where the inventory was 7 times what we have right now, you would see 1%. And then instead of 3. But the going thing is what you normally see is 3% these days. And I'll talk more tomorrow about why is it 3%. And that question is, Kelly had a question earlier about that paragraph, liquidated damages. And that's why we like to see 3% in there. So 3% would be in paragraph 3A. Buyer shall deliver deposit directly to escrow holder by electronic funds. That's the default on that. Now, if it's not going to be electronic funds and you want to make it a personal check or cashier's check, you need to check the box. Question?
Can the listing agent put in the notes, in the remarks, no contingencies and 3% minimum deposit required?
It would be a risk management standpoint if anyone in this room or on Zoom said no contingencies to a buyer. That, my friend, would land you, if there's a dispute between a buyer and a seller, having that instructions on there would be called on the carpet, and you would be testifying as to why you did that. And the seller and you would be not in, if you were the listing agent, would not be held very in high esteem by the courts. So I don't want to see that.
No, I don't do it. I
Okay.
see it with my buyers, and I
And-
don't like that.
And I think it's a terrible mistake. So you could, the 3%, that's part of the negotiations, whether it comes in at 1% or 3%. You know, I don't know why that information is on there, but anyway, I'm not going to try to talk to the listing agent unless it's in our offices. Then I'll talk to him. So anyway, it's important to electronic funds. That's the default in here. So if you represent the buyer, make sure you go over this, how the deposit's going to be held. If the buyer says, oh, you know what, I changed my mind, I decided I'm going to write a personal check. Guess what? He's changing the terms of the contract. Might be minor, but it's still a change to the contract. What do you need to do if there's going to be a change to the contract? You first need to get the other party to agree to any changes. Remember, it takes two people. So you need to see if it's okay with the seller. And then if it is okay, it needs to be in writing. So a simple little thing, changing it from the default of electronic funds wiring to a cashier's check or personal check, needs to be agreement by both parties if you're changing the contract.
So given that, let's say that the buyer, we've explained that, and the buyer decides, I'm just gonna go to the bank and get a cashier's check, and they go ahead and just hand deliver the cashier's check, and now
Yes.
the money is there,
Still get the buy-in from the seller.
even after the fact.
And you know, that happened to me this year, and I wasn't happy because a personal check takes days to clear. So even though it was just kind of a, he went ahead and did this, what difference does it make? Makes a lot of difference. So the seller, through my coaching, said no. So they changed it to they got at least a cashier's check to do it, because he didn't like the wiring. Now, what should have happened was the buyer's agent should have gone over that when they're writing up the offer. Anyway, it's a minor change to a signed contract, but it doesn't matter. Anything that's a change to the contract now needs to be agreed upon by all parties. Okay? All right.
What about the down payment? If they change the down payment, same thing?
Let me tell me more.
If they decide to go instead of 25% down, 20% down, or 15% down.
So they're changing the contract.
Yeah.
Well, tomorrow you'll hear that changing the contract will negate the loan contingency. It will, you should get the buy-in. And if you're going to change the contract, you better change it to more, not less. A seller doesn't care as long as you close the deal, and they won't care if you're changing it from the 20% down payment to a 25% down payment. That doesn't hurt him. It could affect the outcome of the transaction if the buyer's intending to go down from 20% down to 10%. That could affect the closing of the property. So yeah, I would have a problem if I was a seller. Let's go back to now we have the electronic funds, personal check, cashier's check, or there's a box for other, within 3 business days of acceptance or a blank. If if the buyer can't get the cash or can't get the funds in 3 days, you better make the change in your offer. Most sellers, including most listings, they don't like to see 3 days, they like to see 1 day. So, you might want to consider 1 business day. And if the buyer is capable of getting that done, great. If it stops a counter offer on that from a listing agent and the seller changing it from countering it from 3 days to 1 day, you put down 1 day and the buyer can perform in 1 day, then I would do it. But the default is 3 days. If you're somehow the buyer is climbing Mount McKinley and can't get to wiring instructions and it's going to take 4 days to do it, then you better change your offer to reflect how many days it's going to take. Don't set your buyer up for failure before he's even really in the game. Okay, so that takes care of 3A. Now 3A2 was what it used to be years ago, where we as the agent would handle the deposit. And more agents would lose their license over this paragraph than a lot of others, because they're saying, and please do not use 3A2. I don't want you using it. And there should be no reason to use it. Because what we are required to do, once we get a deposit check, you have to go to the office. It has to be logged on to the trust log, and it gets logged on to our office and then it gets logged out of our office. DRE, if they're looking to see if we're in compliance, that's the first thing they're going to do is look at the trust log. And when you mess around with someone's or client's money, you could be in trouble. I've told this story. You know what? I got a minute. I'll tell you again. There was a colleague of mine that worked with me years ago when we didn't have 3A1. All we had was 3A2. And it said that we would, and that's all we did. That was our normal. We would collect the check when we're writing up the offer. That was really before we had DocuSign and everything else. And we were actually physically with the client writing up the offer. So we'd write up the offer, get the check, and then in this case, it would say that the check would, that we would have the deposit and then made out to the title company, and then we would deposit that check, give it to the escrow upon when it's accepted. Well, my friend took the check on like a Thursday night. They made the offer, got accepted. She came in and gave the check to our front desk person. Oh, we got logged into the office. The office gave it to the front desk for, at that time, the title companies would send their rep to pick up the deposit check so it could go into escrow. What happened in this case is the buyer bought the property, they had a deal. The next morning, the buyer got buyer's remorse and decided that I want to cancel this deal. They had all contingencies. They haven't received their TDS. Legitimately, they are entitled to get out of the contract and get their deposit back. But again, a cancellation, like anything else, it takes two parties. You have to have an agreement on that. No question that the buyer had the right to cancel with their investigations and all that. They had the right to do that. They didn't even get the TDS, which you'll learn about tomorrow, that gives them the right without any reason to cancel. So he calls up the agent, and the agent, he says, hey, I decided I don't want to buy it. I want to go make an offer on this other property. Where's my deposit? Because I need my deposit to make the next offer. So she said, let me check the front desk. In the front desk, the check was still there, title didn't get there. And so she said, oh, okay, the deal's falling apart. Give me back the check. I'm giving it back to the buyer. Okay. seems legitimate enough, right? Anyway, the listing agent, this is when the inventory was 6 times higher than what we are right now. So it was a buyer's market. And the the seller's agent wasn't thrilled that the buyer's canceling. And okay, that's what's going on. So come Monday, at the end of the day, the listing agent calls my friend, the buyer's agent, and says, "Where's the check?" Well, I returned it to the buyer because we're canceling the deal. No, buyer's canceling the deal. Seller hasn't agreed to cancel it, and we have to go by what the contract says. And if you look at paragraph 3A2, it says that the buyer's agent's going to get the check to the escrow. So the buyer's agent did not do that, did not fulfill what their obligation was. 4 days later, Department of Real Estate comes in and says, we have a problem. Camped out at that front conference room for a week, because while they're there, they might as well look at about 25 other files and see what's going on. To end the story, what happened was, as a result of mishandling deposits, my friend lost her license. So anyway, it's okay. She was part of a startup company and has bazillions of dollars right now. So real estate didn't hurt her at all. But DRE takes it very, very serious how we handle money of our clients. So, the sad part is I can see a lot of people doing the same thing that Rochelle did, and it got her into trouble. So, yes.
Why isn't there at all?
Why isn't there a what?
Why is this paragraph in the contract if it's so bad?
What's the question?
Why is the paragraph in there if it's such a problem? Well, it's only a problem if you mess up. Don't mess up. Better yet, don't follow that paragraph. Don't check the box and just go with paragraph 3A. You know what? Why is anything in this contract? This contract is designed and revamped and dealt with a group of our peers that belong to the forms committee of CAR. They're made up of agents, brokers, attorneys, and they design the contracts for us with the input of everyone. They get thousands of requests and they honor every one of them to review it. It's the hardest working committee that I know of at CAR that does it. So that does work. So why? Because there's people that were because it was used to be there, they still want it in there. That's why. Other than our peers felt that it should still stay in there. I don't know, I can't remember if that is going to be in there in the revision. I don't know. So things change usually based on lawsuits. So, all right, so back to 1 and 2. All right, so we talked about the initial deposit. Most people said 3%. What if you only put 1% on the initial deposit, which is fine. Most sellers and most sellers' agents want a total of 3% deposit when the contingencies are removed, if there are contingencies. So then that 3% deposit is at risk if the buyer is to flake out after the removal of contingencies. So the increase in deposits there for if something's under 3% for the initial deposit, that's where we would like to see an increase in deposit. If you add the initial deposit and the increased deposit, that should be 3%. And again, the 3%, we'll talk about it tomorrow. That's where the liquidated damages paragraph comes in. And that puts that money at risk. 3% or the deposit, whichever is less. So the increase in deposit. Just know that the important thing that let's talk about the blanks here first. buyer shall deposit with escrow holder an increased deposit in the amount of blank. So typically, initial plus increase equals 3%. So if it's 1% initial, 2% would be an increase. And then either within so many days of acceptance or an occurrence. So typically, as an agent, I like to see that increase in deposit takes place once the contingencies are removed. So either you can put down the number of days when the contingency is supposed to be removed, or check the box and put, or no box, or upon removal of contingencies. So that's typically where I would put if there's an increased deposit. The important thing to learn on this one, and remember, this increased deposit, if you're going to have an increased deposit, there is a form that needs to go with that increased deposit. It's called an RID. It says it in the contract. It says it in that paragraph. RID, which is a receipt for increased deposit. That receipt for increased deposit has to go with that additional deposit to make that deposit part of liquidated damages. By law, the initial deposit, because it's with the contract, that becomes part of liquidated damages. But the important part is if there's an increase in deposit, in order for that to be part of the 3% liquidated damages, you need that RID. It's important that we as agents make sure that is carried out.
Yeah. What is the benefit of doing that?
The benefit is doing is that we're adhering. The benefit to the seller. Let me give you a scenario, and then I'll answer the question. I'm buying $1 million property. I put up $1,000 deposit as my initial deposit. When I remove my contingencies, I'm going to put $29,000 additional to get $30,000, 3%. I remove my contingencies. I write a check to escrow for $29,000. I do not sign the RID. I decide the day before close of escrow, I want to back out. I don't want to lose on my deposit, but what am I at risk? What can the seller go after me for? 1,000, because that RID was not with that 29,000. Okay, so the next question someone asks is, well, me as a buyer's agent, why would I want to do that? Why would I want to have the buyer do the RID?
To compete with other offers?
Well, no, because that RID is done at the additional deposit, which is after the fact. It might be 17 days after the acceptance. So the initial deposit is you're competing against other offers.
Right.
The additional deposit is after the fact. I might give the initial deposit when I remove my contingencies 17 days later.
Right.
So the reason why you do it is because you got to follow the contract. And that's what the contract is saying. And to be honest with you, as a buyer's agent, the day before close of escrow, I want my buyer to have some skin in the game and not flake out and just buy the FISBO next door that just popped on the market. So we need to follow the contract, and the contract says the RID needs to be filled out. So we have the seller really has the seller's agent really has an obligation, but I put that also on the buyer's agent's responsibility too. Okay, does everyone understand that increased deposit brings a nuance with that RID? And to be honest with you, for anyone that's been in the real estate for the last 5 years probably hasn't done many increased deposits, right? I'll go beyond that, probably almost 10 years, probably 2010, 2012, you were getting your 1% deposits. From then on, it's been 3% all day long, no questions asked. So anyway, okay, so we got the deposit taken care of. Paragraph C is an all cash offer. So if you are, if the buyer is buying all cash, you would check this box. It's not contingent on buyer getting a loan. There's no loan involved. You're saying it's all cash. And then also on paragraph C, it's saying that the buyer either within 3 days or whatever number you want will deliver to seller verification that they have the money to make it an all cash offer. Now, what do we like to see as a seller's agent? If I get an all cash offer, what do I want to see? I want to see verification before you're being treated seriously. So I would like to do this, check the box, and I put 0 days after acceptance. And I like to have that verification with the offer. Any questions on A, B, and C? Yeah.
I have a question about all cash offers. What I see quite often is especially investors, they make so-called all cash offers, but then they get a hard money loan on the back end, right? So the question, what is the legalities of this? What are the potential pitfalls and how to treat it on the listing side or on the buyer side representing somebody like that?
Okay, so first of all, so when it comes down to verification, what are they providing you? A letter from the hard money lender?
Something like this.
I mean, unless it's a bank account under the buyer's name, then anything else is not an all cash offer, which is fine. The legality of it, Dimitri, is that if they default, that deposit is going to be at risk because they said that they're going to write an all cash offer, and it's really not. What they I think what they should be doing is they should be saying that it's a loan, because it really is a loan, but yet they can explain that it's a hard money loan and the cash will be there in 5 days after acceptance. I think that this case in point, adding paragraph C to this contract shakes all this out. Show me the money, or show me the BS that the buyer's trying to do. It's not going to fly. It's not all cash deal because it's not all cash. Now, it may be quote unquote as good as all cash because the hard money lender is not going under the same specific qualifications that a traditional lender is. But unless there's a bank account with the buyer's name on it, showing that cash there, it is not an all cash offer, in my opinion.
Understood. So what could be the liability on both sides for basically treating a hard money offer as a cash offer?
Well, the liability for the buyer is he's probably going to lose his deposit.
And what would be the basis for losing the deposit? Misrepresentation or whatever?
Non-performance.
Okay, right. So basically,
breach of contract.
So performance on all cash offer basically means buyer simply deposits all the cash and not relying on the lender. But I guess this is where the issue is, right? The buyers would get the cash from the lender, maybe even bypassing the escrow. If they get the cash bypassing the escrow, can it still be all cash offer?
The buyer getting the cash? Well, I imagine the only problem is if the buyer shows up with a suitcase full of money, then the escrow company would have a problem. And then you might have some government interference in terms of, all of a sudden you got $1 million worth of cash. It goes, I don't know what the liability is. Now, DEA is going to be involved. I have no idea. All I'm saying is that if the buyer's saying that it's an all cash offer and they can't close escrow because they don't have the cash, that's a breach of contract. I think it's pretty simple as to what the outcome would be, that they would lose their deposit. I don't know if they would lose any more if liquidated damages was not signed. Probably could lose potential more. So
they failed, right? They failed.
Yeah, as long as, hey, if they check all cash offer and it's a hard money loan and they close escrow, no one cares. But as a seller's agent, you need to do some due diligence to make sure that everything in this contract is verified. And if I have if I have a listing and I'm a seller's agent and it's all cash and it's really a hard money loan, I can't tell my seller that we have an all cash offer. I don't think we're representing our client a fiduciary duty. I think we need to say, hey, this is a hard money lender that will give money if, based on this transaction, but the buyer doesn't have the cash. He's got a commitment for the cash. Okay? Did I answer that question first? Okay, let's move on. Libby.
Can you talk quickly about what happens when a buyer defaults on a contract? So if there's no question they defaulted, so does the seller automatically get that deposit back?
No, seller does not get the deposit back automatically. Still has to go through the process of whether it's fighting or the buyer agreeing to let the deposit go. The first step in a deposit dispute, we'll talk about that tomorrow, will be when there is a dispute, the first step would be mediation. Then the second step will be either arbitration, if it's elected, or a lawsuit to get that deposit back. It puts, when you, there's a lot of factors in this. Contingencies, no contingencies, what's the reason for the default? It's not clear cut 100%, no problem. You still have to get the deposit.
So that's what I have explained to my buyers before, but it's not always clear cut that if they get anything back, it's not all or nothing. Is that true?
Well, defining the liquidated damages, it is. If the seller, again, tomorrow, if the seller can prove damages, it doesn't matter how much, they're entitled to the whole liquidated damages. Reality is it usually gets settled because it's a long process to go through the courts or the even arbitration to get a handle on deposits. And usually sellers just want to get to be made whole. And sometimes there's negotiation between the buyer and seller just to end this issue and save money on attorneys. So there's no clear-cut answer. It's either negotiated, but you need to counsel your buyer that if they default, they're at risk their entire deposit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Doesn't mean it's going to happen, but you got to tell them it's a good chance it will. So,
and at the very least, it's probably going to get tied up for a while, unless the seller says, yeah, we're fine with it.
Or the seller takes another deal that's more money.
Exactly.
And then there's no loss.
Yeah, and they just say, okay.
Yeah, and today I'm going to tell you it's a case by case basis, and we got to just look at it. But every time a buyer, if they default on the contract, they could be at loss their deposit, and if they didn't sign liquidated damages, it could be more than their deposit, or it could be even more than their deposit, even if they sign liquidated damages and never gave an initial deposit. So I don't want to confuse everyone, but it's case by case basis on how the default took place. Yeah. I mean, the default can simply be that the buyer never made an initial deposit. How many times do we hear that happening? Just because there's no deposit in escrow doesn't mean the seller can't go after the buyer for a breach of contract. And it's argued by a lot of attorneys, including our own, that since you never made that deposit, liquidated damages that you signed is not part of the contract anymore, and the seller can go after you for the full damage of their loss, which could be more than the 3%. Okay. All right.
Mike,
Yeah.
When the buyer says, how can I get out of the contract? That's a red flag. I said, why don't you sleep over the offer? Let's don't make the offer now. If you're thinking about getting out of the contract now, before you sign the contract.
I would say this. Tell me more. What is going on?
Yeah.
I mean, you know,
I think it's a red flag, but it doesn't always have to be because buyers are naturally going to be scared.
buyers are concerned. How do I get out of this contract? And it takes extra time to counsel your client. What are the concerns? What are we talking about? What are they,
What's happening?
what's happening? Okay, so let's talk about the loan in here. So the loans, the first loan in the amount of blank, that's where you put that number in. And then the default is that it's a regular conventional financing. If it's VA, FHA, or something else, you would need to check the box. This loan shall be fixed rate not to exceed blank, or an adjustable rate with the initial rate not to exceed blank. Now, these interest rates, putting them in, really only affects if there's a loan contingency. If there's no loan contingency, you don't care. The seller doesn't care what you put in here. It doesn't matter. There's no loan contingency. So I'm only referring to if there's a loan contingency, you need to, this is almost a built-in secondary contingency. And what it's saying is it's putting a limit what the loan interest rate is going to be until that buyer locks in the rate. It's just to protect some catastrophic occurrence to take place by the time you get an offer accepted to the time that the buyer locks in his rate with the lender. Example, a catastrophe takes place, a horrific terrorist problem takes place, and the rates go from 3, whatever they're, say they're 3% right now, and they go up to 7. Now, does that maybe change some of the buyers' minds about getting $1 million loan when it was 3% they were counting on and now it's 7%? They still might qualify for the loan at 7%, but they don't want to buy that property at a 7% interest rate at $1 million. So this little couple blanks here is to protect the buyer from that time between making the offer, getting accepted, and locking in the rate. You still have we're going to assume that the buyer has a loan contingency. Loan contingency is getting a loan. If you leave it blank, there's no limit as to what the loan's going to be. So in that scenario, if you left it blank and the buyer can qualify for a loan at 7%, he's tied to get that loan. And so that's why you never leave it blank if you're getting a loan contingency. If you have a loan contingency, you put on it. We've had a deal in one of the offices where it was left blank. The buyer's lender said, I can't get you the loan I promised you at whatever that rate was, 6%, but I can get you a loan at 10%. Well, the problem was the buyer could afford and could get the loan at 10%, but he didn't want it at 10% because the house was obviously more expensive. So he tried to back out, saying that my loan contingency, I want out. Well, there was no rejection. The lender was giving him a loan, just not at the numbers that he wanted. It was our fault because we never put a limit at what that rate was going to be. The buyer lost his $5,000 deposit. The agent wrote a check for $5,000 to the buyer because they blew it. They left it blank. Now, if there's no loan contingency, you can put whatever number in here. It doesn't matter. Matter of fact, if I was the seller's agent, I would appreciate if you left it blank. That way, I know you understand this paragraph. So I'm only referring to if there is a loan contingency, then you need to fill that in with a percentage. And again, it's just to protect a catastrophe happen. Now, when I fill this in, I take, say the current rate is at 3%. I factor in a little bit higher for some market fluctuations. Could be markets can change 0.25%. I check with my favorite lender who's doing the deal to make sure what I'm putting in here, that my buyer can qualify for, instead of 3%, he can qualify for 3.25%. And it's just a doomsday, just a protection from the 7% deal at 3.25%. If my buyer's okay and he could qualify for that loan, I'll do a little wiggle room to accommodate for market conditions. Okay. Do you guys understand this, filling in this not to exceed number and why we do it? It's a protection for the buyer. Again, only if there's a loan contingency, it's a protection for the buyer. So make sure you fill it in. And then the last line is, regardless of the type of loan, buyer shall pay points not to exceed. What is a point in the loan?
Percentage, so 1 point is 1%.
1% of the loan would be 1 point. And that's a, and when interest rates are higher, that's a great tool to determine what the interest rate is. The higher the points, which is prepaid interest, the lower the interest rate. When I bought my first house, I had to pay points because the interest rate was at 18.5%. I couldn't qualify at 18.5%. So I paid some points, got the seller to help me to contribute some points. So I got my 14.75. 14.75. I said, if I ever get under 10%, I'm in Fat City.
What
So-
a negotiator.
Well, you know what, that was done because you had to, not many people were qualifying at those rates there. So points were used as a tool. And again, a point is prepaid interest. The higher the points, the lower the interest rate. Lower the points, higher the interest rate. And right now, so that's why you don't see many points being used, because the interest rates are pretty much low enough. So, yeah.
Mike, it's Christine. So on the same note, zip form doesn't allow us to put in a 0 where the percentage is, or an NA, non-applicable.
Yep.
So if I leave a blank, wouldn't that, one could possibly argue that, you left a blank, that means you can buy the loan rate down to, lower than 3% or whatever the percentage that you cap, right above.
Yeah. So when you can't put 0 down, it means that there's no, you're not putting a number 1, 2, or 3. So there's no that means
There's no cap.
Yeah. Well, no. It means that there's no loan, there's no points that are going to be in this loan.
Interesting. Because I was thinking maybe someone can argue back and say, yeah, you can put, that means there's no cap on the point. That means you can, pay a point to bring the loan rate down to.
Well, I mean, that's always a great tool to use if your buyer has the wherewithal and the money to do that. But by leaving it blank, it means 0 points.
Okay, thank you.
It's just the way that we work with zip forms on this.
Yeah.
You can't put 0 down in that one, right?
No, you can't. You can't put anything at all unless it's 1, 2, 3, and 4 a digit. Yeah.
Yep.
Thanks.
Okay. So you guys see in paragraph D1, it says first loan. If you look at paragraph D2, there's a second loan. Not a lot of times, but in certain circumstances, you're getting a 90% loan in the 80% first, 10% second. The 10%, the second loan is different terms than the first loan. Why do we have different terms from the first and second sometimes? Well, it could be that, or it could just be that it's a higher risk. There's less protection, less equity. So sometimes I'll see on a contract that it's a 90% loan, when in reality is, if I go through the looking and investigating, it's an 80% first, 10% second. That 10% second's a different terms than the first. So it wasn't done correctly. It wasn't filled out. You need to put whatever the first is, put those terms. And the same verbiage is for the second. You put those terms in there and you separate it. There's some contracts that are 90% loans. And that would be okay because it's a 90% first. Most of them are 80, 10, and 10% down. Okay, and paragraph 3 talks about FHA and VA loans. If there's an FHA or VA loan, they are required to do more than just an appraisal of value. They're required to also do an appraisal based on the physical condition. And sometimes in an FHA or VA, there are requirements put on the buyer, could be the seller, to these items have to be fixed in order to get the loan. So in this paragraph, it clearly states that it's not the seller's responsibility to do the repairs, but the buyer is going to give the seller the list of the repairs that are needed to get done. Now, could there be some negotiations between the buyer and the seller? Yeah, or there's no negotiations, but there is a requirement to get the work done prior to getting the loan in that regard. Okay, and this contract just right now says that the seller's just getting the list within 17 days of what needs to be done. Okay, additional financing terms, be anything else that's in the financing, as to what, you know, maybe the seller is giving a credit for closing costs. Could be anything else that you fill in that blank paragraph E. Paragraph F is the balance of the down payment. And then paragraph G is the total purchase price. So again, the deposits, the loan, and the down payment should equal the purchase price. And if you use zip forms, it's automatically calculated for you. If you're filling it out longhand, use your toes and fingers. Any questions on page 1? We're zipping. Yes, at the bottom of each page, it's initial. Okay, let's get on page 2. All right, we're still in paragraph 3, but next page. Okay, remember we talked about the verification if it's an all cash offer? Well, here's the verification of the down payment and closing costs. So what, and again, what should the buyer have with them with the verification? When should the buyer provide that verification? With the offer. And if you're doing that, you check the box at the end of paragraph H, and it says verifications attached. That should be a no-brainer that when we're presenting an offer, that should be included. The first contingency that we're going to talk about, we talked about in paragraph 3 about the interest rate. That was kind of a little mini contingency, but it's not the main contingencies of the contract. The first main contingency of the contract is the appraisal contingency. That is saying that the default on this is that there's an appraisal contingency, and the default is that it's good for 17 days. You could change that. You don't need an appraisal contingency on certain deals. If for example, if the buyer has a lot of money, or has a lot of money, is putting a big down payment down, really is not going to worry about the appraisal contingency because it doesn't need to appraise that purchase price to get the loan amount that he wants. However, is it important if the buyer's scraping everything he's got and he's getting a 90% loan, 10% down, and he has the 10% only in the closing costs, can he afford to have the appraisal not appraised at sales price? Probably not, unless he has an uncle, money bags. But there's times when it's good not to have an appraisal contingency, and there's times that it's bad not to have an appraisal contingency. The default on paragraph I is that there is an appraisal contingency and that the house needs to appraise at the purchase price within 17 days to remove the contingency. You could check the box and then there's no appraisal contingency. Not having contingencies strengthens the terms of the contract, which strengthens the seller's attraction to you. However, you have to, when you're representing a buyer, have to tell them about the pitfalls of not having contingencies. There's a reason why years ago we had contingencies as a normal way of doing business. And if you don't have the wherewithal to get the extra down payment to make up for the lower appraisal price, you can't afford to buy the house and you're going to default and your deposit could be at risk. So you need to counsel your client, even though they've written 4 or 5 offers and haven't gotten their deal yet. You need to explain to them, they have to make the ultimate decision whether they need the appraisal contingency or not. Okay, so that's the first contingency. The next one is the loan contingency. And this talks about paragraph 1, within 3 days of acceptance, the buyer is going to provide a pre-qual or pre-approval letter on their loan. Okay. Now, again, same thing with the verification. At the end of paragraph J1, you could accompany the purchase contract with that pre-qual or pre-approval, and you check the box. Paragraph 2 explains what the loan contingency really is. It's first saying that the buyer's going to act diligently to get the loan. In other words, if there's a loan contingency of 20 days, they're not waiting to day 19 to decide which lender they're going to pick. They're working diligently, quickly, and efficiently to get the loan approved. They also mention in paragraph 2 that the loan contingency is separate from the appraisal contingency. If I'm getting a loan of $800,000 on $1 million purchase, okay, if the appraisal comes in at $900,000 and I can get the loan at 80% of 900 or 720, my loan contingency doesn't apply. So I got my loan, just happens to be not at 800,000, but it's at 720,000, and that's where my loan contingency. So if I could get the 720 loan, then I would use the loan contingency as a legitimate out. I can't use the loan contingency if it appraised at 900 because that's a separate contingency, is the appraisal. So I just want to make sure that you understand that the appraisal contingency and loan contingency are not tied together. Before this contract was written, buyers were arguing that, hey, I'm using a loan contingency because I could get my 80% loan of $1 million. Then I want out. So they separated and clearly separated the appraisal contingency versus the loan contingency. Okay, everyone understand that? Zoomers? We good? Okay. All right. So the other thing is that the down payment and the closing costs are not part of the loan contingency. So if you think you're going to have $200,000 down on an $800,000 loan and $1 million purchase price, and then your gift money from your mom and dad of $50,000, you get into an argument and they're not giving you the $50,000 anymore, and you can't buy the property, that's not a loan contingency issue. That's a down payment issue. And nowhere in this contract was there a contingency for down payment. So the loan contingency is not part of down payment or deposits and closing costs. Okay, So paragraph J3 is the actual loan contingency removal. And the default that they put is 21 days. That's the default in this contract. 21 days after acceptance to remove the loan contingency. Do you need 21 days?
No.
Maybe. So how do you find out how many days you need?
One more
Talk
question.
to your lender. And I never like to set up my buyers or my vendors for failure. So I'm not going to put in this contract that 10 days when the lender's told me that he needs 14. Because come 10 days from now, it's going to be a problem. So always check if there's a loan contingency, check with your lender as to how many days he needs to do that. Okay. So you don't need to have 21. You could put whatever you want. I mean, some of these commercial deals, maybe it's more than 21 days you need. I don't know. Or, kind of commercial, residential, quasi. I don't know. So anyway, so these numbers are picked out by the forms committee. And I'm sure there was a lot of argument between the committee members as to whether it was supposed to be 14 or 30. So they just pick a number. Okay? So that's the loan contingency. So we talked about the appraisal. We talked about the loan contingency. Or you could check box 4, which is no loan contingency. So checking box 4 is you could have a loan, but you're confident that the buyer's confident that he's not worried about the contingency of getting the loan. Either they've gone through the process already and been pre-approved, or they are confident that they have the means to be able to perform under not having a loan contingency. So you would check the box of no loan contingency if you're having 0 days for a loan contingency. Okay? And actually, if you put a no loan contingency, you can't fill out anything in paragraph 3 with days then. Right?
Right.
Okay. All right. Okay, paragraph 5 is an important paragraph that we used to argue all the time. And what that says is that if a seller or anybody's giving a credit, there's going to be limitations to what the lender allows. There were times when, say, a buyer, the roof was failing and he wanted $15,000 credit from the seller so he could fix a roof. And so it was just a credit for closing costs. Well, the lender puts a limit as to how much they will allow the buyer to collect for credits, because they want to ensure that if they're getting an 80% loan and 20% down payment, that the buyer has 20% equity in that property. So without any limitations, I might want to buy $1 million house, but I say I want an 80% loan, and I tell I make an offer of 1.2, and I want the seller to give me $200,000 credit for closing costs. If that was able to work, I would have nothing into the property. I'd have no money into it because I get my 80% loan on the 1.2 purchase price. It could appraise, probably not, but I'm just saying that's why there's a limitation that lenders put on buyers for the maximum amount of closing costs or credits that from the seller, from anyone, from the agents, from whatever, they want to make sure that the buyer has skin in the game to protect their loan. So typically, I've never seen anything more than 3%, and it could be even lower depending on what the closing costs are going to be. Okay.
When you close the loan, when you close the purchase or sale, do you have to disclose that it was a credit in MLS?
No.
No.
don't have to disclose that.
Will
in the
that
laws.
affect the com?
I imagine it could, maybe not, depends how much the credit would be. Let's move on.
Mike, you have a question there.
Yeah.
Dimitri, go ahead.
A couple questions. So one on the appraisal contingency. What if the buyer wants to say, if the house appraises, but not at the purchase price, but at this other price? Does this work? What is the right way to write it? Any thoughts on this?
So the question is that the buyer wants to buy it at the appraised price if it doesn't come in at purchase price?
Well, let's say the purchase price is $1 million, and let's say the buyer says the property to appraise for at least 950.
Sure. Yeah. There's a that just like you said, that could be part of the contingency. The appraisal to be to appraise at least $950,000 or more. So that what that means is you're saying that the buyer's okay with a 950 appraisal. They'll put the $50,000 towards the additional down payment to get their loan.
And the question, what is the best way to write it? Because the standard appraisal contingency paragraph does not provide for this. Do you just put it into other terms? How to make sure it's phrased properly and all that?
But you need to put in other terms and you say purchase price, the appraisal to be at least X amount of dollars should and so you could just simply say appraisal, the contingency to be 17 days, appraisal to home to appraise at least $950,000.
Great. And another question on the loan contingency. If we are checking no loan contingency, do any other terms that relate to loan contingency, do they matter? Because I have got an accountant that was saying, hey, it's not enough just to say no loan contingency, you have to put 0 days there. Does this 0 day matter?
Well, what you should do if you're writing up an offer with no loan contingency, you should put 0 down or check the box no loan contingency, and additionally with the purchase agreement have a contingency removal.
Right. Yeah, and I have done all that. And the question is, if I also do not say loan contingency to be 0 days, if I just leave it blank, does it have any significance? Yeah,
well, when you do a contingency removal, you're removing the loan contingency. That's all. You actually could have 21 days in the loan contingency in the contract, but if you have a contingency removal that says 0 for loan contingency, you're done.
Right, that's what I wanted to clarify, because I saw this point being raised. I thought it was moot, and I just wanted to confirm that.
No, you need to have, with the Sierra contract, you need to have contingency removal form with the offer. When it says, when you're putting in 0 contingencies, you need that contingency removal form with it. And that goes with all the contingencies.
Yep.
Okay, paragraph K talks about the buyer state of financing. This is where the type of financing that the buyer is saying that he's doing in paragraph 1, that is what the loan contingency is covering. So if in paragraph 3 on page 1, if the buyer is saying he's going to get an 80% loan, 20% down, and there was a reference earlier that the buyer changed his mind and wants to get a 90% loan and he doesn't get it, buyer's in breach of contract, and the loan contingency is not going to protect him because the loan contingency is based on the offer of what was on paragraph 3. So the stated financing is what everyone is going by. And also the seller doesn't need to cooperate with the buyer if he's changing his tune. So if he's saying that I'm buying all cash and then when he wants to get a loan, seller doesn't have to cooperate. Seller doesn't have to let the appraiser in the house. So be careful how you put your offers together and what you're portraying to the seller. Sale of buyer's property, that's where we have a contingency sale, where the default is that the buyer doesn't need to sell something in order to make this offer to buy something. If the seller needs to sell something, he needs to check the box in paragraph 4B, and there'll be a form called the COP. And that's the contingency of sale property. Paragraph 5 is where all the addendums are located. All the advisories, addendums, you would check the box and they would be, when you check the box, they'd be spit out and printed out and accompanied with the rest of the RPA contract. Paragraph 6, anything that's blank. I mean, that's your blank paragraph. Anything that you want to put in the contract can go there. And also with technology, if you typing in everything in paragraph 6, you run out of room, it'll automatically go to an addendum. I caution you by putting so much verbiage in there. We want to write a contract that's clear and concise. And my experience is the more that we ad lib and fill in things, the more that we're going to be convoluted. So short and sweet. Yeah.
So I think you already answered this, but I just want to triple clarify. If you want to write, if you're the buyer and you want to write in a credit for, say, carpet, the seller has told you they'll give you a credit for carpet. So you got to put that in the contract. Is the best place to put it in other terms?
Yeah.
Or back here on additional financing terms?
No, I would do anything dealing with, well, either one. If it's a credit, you could put it in paragraph 3, or you could put it in paragraph 6.
Okay,
It doesn't matter.
thank you.
But typically, the credit that's being asked from the seller is usually credit for costs, right? Closing costs. Or you got to be careful what your credit is for. If it's for a roof, that'll raise a red flag with the lender.
Yes.
If for carpets, it's not going to make, that's cosmetic. It's not going to shouldn't make a big deal. It'd be easier if you just put closing costs and don't define what it's for. Better off, just because you got someone doing a file review in Topeka, Kansas, that might object to, the condition of the home. Check with your, let's do this. Check with your lender.
Yeah, no, I understand that, but I'm just thinking, well, I guess the flooring cost, the closing costs would always be at least, say, 3,000. So you could, I'm thinking, what if the closing costs weren't what you were?
Check with your lender.
Okay.
On that.
Thank
Just
you.
understand that the more you put in defining, there could be someone objecting to the condition of the house.
Yeah, I understand.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right. So other terms, you could put in what you need to put in. Examples could be that you are related to the client. You are related to the buyer if you're a buyer's agent. It could be credits. It could be anything. Basically, that's the one place that you have to put anything that you want to put in there. Allocation of costs. Again, this is not for who's doing repairs. This is only for who's paying for reports. And 7A talks about the natural hazard zone disclosure report. Usually that's a seller, and then you would check the box if you wanted the tax, environmental, and other. And prepared by, I usually just put seller's choice, or you can put whatever you want in there. Usually you have the disclosures in hand when you're a buyer's agent, and I put the company that's in there. on that. Paragraphs 2 and 3 are just, I leave blank. The buyer, if he leaves them blank, still has the right to order any and all inspections that he wants. Again, I leave it blank because I don't want to put down that my buyer's going to get a home inspection or a roof inspection, because then the lender can request it and has every right to request it. So I leave them blank. Any questions on allocations of cost? Okay, we're moving right along. Paragraph 7B, 1, pay for smoke alarm and carbon monoxide, and the water heater bracing. Not only do I check the box for seller, and most of the time, there'll be occasions when it might be the buyer, but I'm also going to address when it's going to be done. And I add in paragraph 6 or the addendum that I want to have it done either by the buyer or by the seller before the appraisal, or within 5 days from acceptance of offer. And the reason I do that is that an appraisal, somehow the appraisers have become the monitor of getting this done, and they won't release the appraisal and will charge to go back out there if there's no, if these things are done. So not only do you need to address who's going to pay for getting it done, when is it going to get done? I wanted to get done quickly. And and it doesn't address it in this contract as to when it's going to get done, other than prior to close of escrow. And I think we're missing the boat on that. Okay, any questions on that? Does anyone agree or anyone disagree with that?
No, just a note that you only need that if you see in the property inspection report that it's not there.
Yeah. Yeah, if it's there, it's good. Paragraph 2, buyer or seller shall pay the cost of compliance with any minimum mandatory government inspections or reports. Negotiable. Typically, most people put down seller, right? And then we see, depends on where you're selling, right? Are there any minimum mandatory government inspections and reports that you guys can think of? My Santa Cruz peeps, anybody?
Sewer lateral.
There you go. So Santa Clara County doesn't have any minimum government retrofits yet. They will. There's been times when they've tried to add requirements region-wide. I mean, the last one that I could think of was changing all the fireplaces to be gas burning and converting them so that they weren't smoke wood fireplaces, which would cost on average about $5,000 at that time per fireplace, and they were making it as a point of sale. So Santa Clara County doesn't have those right now. Even the low flow toilets is not a point of sale. It is a requirement that everyone should have them, whether you are selling your property or not. The point of sale is the sewer laterals in Santa Cruz right now. So, and with, I mean, it becomes a problem, right? They had to adjust because of the time you couldn't get them done in time of closing escrow. So anyway, so that's one thing. But if you leave it blank, it's fine right now in Santa Clara County. But I'm just telling you, it's not going to last forever. And in Santa Cruz County, you can't leave it blank. You got to address it as to who's going to be doing it.
Every destination, when I take this item, every destination counter with
Yeah, where's the listings at? All right, so right now, there's no requirements.
But they want me to uncheck that. It's okay, that's not, I accept that.
Yep. Okay. Anyway, so you need to be familiar with where you're selling. I mean, sewer lateral is not just Santa Cruz, it's also up the peninsula, right?
Oakland also has a sidewalk issue too. So it's really like, you know, that our, what is that, the regional disclosures that we get and we just kind of read through them.
Yeah.
When we're selling outside of our area, it's really important to read that because it has it in there for those areas.
Yeah.
In Carmel, I saw two houses in Carmel, also they have the Meister appliances and low flow and the pressure, water pressure in the house. Yeah, the water, it's even the water.
Okay, escrow and title. Now, again, it depends what's customary in the county that you're doing your work. Escrow and title, buyer or seller pays the escrow fee. What do who pays what, where?
Depends on the.
All right, Santa Clara County, who pays the escrow fee?
Seller.
Okay, in Santa Cruz, who pays the escrow fee? Okay, all right, so you need to, actually, you don't need to, but you should make it customary. Know the area that you're selling in, and don't put your buyer at a disadvantage because you don't know what's customary in the area. But again, everything is negotiable, right? Okay, so escrow holder shall be, and that's where you fill out the company. A lot of the times, well, most of the times up in Northern California, the escrow holder and the title company are one and the same. It's not always that way. In Southern California, two separate companies. Okay, paragraph C2, same thing. Buyer or seller shall pay the owner's title insurance policy, and the owner's title policy should be issued by the blank is the company again. Just for your own information on that, escrow companies, you know, say you're paying a certain amount up here in Northern California, in Southern California, the costs are triple. Just to let you know that. So a $1,200 policy would be like $3,800 down in Southern Cal. Anyway, that's why a lot of real estate companies have their own escrow company. They make more money off of that than they do in real estate. All right, regardless of who's paying for the owner's title policy, the buyer needs to pay for the lender policy. The lender requires title insurance for their security of lending out the money. So, any questions on escrow and title? Let's do these other costs here. County transfer tax. Who pays that and how much is it?
Santa Clara County seller.
Seller pays, and what's the cost? $1.10. $1.10 per thousand. City transfer tax. Who's got a city transfer tax?
San Jose, 50/50.
San Jose, who else? Palo Alto, who else?
It's four.
I have to look at my notes.
Mountain View, Palo Alto, and
Elroy.
no, Mountain View, Palo Alto, San Jose. Alviso was the other one, but that's San Jose. And for my friends in Santa Cruz, anyone want to chime in? City transfer tax? No one's in Santa Cruz? Doesn't Watsonville, parts of Watsonville have a city transfer tax?
Santa Cruz does too, city. I don't know what it is though.
City transfer tax in Santa Cruz? I didn't think there was. Okay. Anyway, that just proves know where you're selling. Okay. All right. And actually, your escrow companies have a the website, you can find out where the customary costs are for all these things. For not just what the costs are for transfer tax, but also other fees associated with it. Number 3, who pays for the homeowner's transfer fee? It's negotiable, guys. I'm not going to say seller does. It's negotiable. And you need to find out from the HOA what those costs are. It is required that the seller pay for the HOA fees and prepping the documents per the code, which includes this, and this. HOA's got around that, and that's a law. Civil Code 4525. The HOA's got around that by producing other documents not associated with that code, and that's where they charge the $400 for doc prep fee and whatever. So that's in paragraph 5. And who usually pays for that? When I represent buyers, I have the seller. I put the seller paying for that documents. Paragraph 6, because the lender needs this, buyer pays for the HOA certification fee. Paragraph 7, the private transfer tax, it's negotiable. The private transfer tax is similar to a city or county transfer tax, although it's, as the word says, it's private. So it's an organization or an individual that gets a fee for every time this property is sold. It came up recently back in the early 2000s with a development in El Dorado Hills. But they've been, this private transfer tax has been around 30, 40, 50 years, very isolated. And basically, this case, what came to light was this developer wanted to develop this big complex, El Dorado Hills, and the Sierra Club was against it. And the Sierra Club went to the developer builder and said, I will not object to your development if you pay us a transfer fee on every property that sells for the next 50 years. So they were getting a 1% or 2% fee, and they eliminated the first transfer from the developer to the first buyer. But every subsequent sale, the sellers would pay a 1% to 2% fee, just like a city transfer tax or county transfer tax, to the Sierra Club, because it was encumbered. It was in the it was required per the encumbrance in there. So the problem was it was kind of hidden. No one knew about it. It was in like page 200 of the CC&Rs in fine print that there was a fee that we had to pay. There no future private transfer taxes are established anymore, that they can't do that, but the existing ones are still there. The good news is, by law, they now require disclosures. So it'll be in the natural hazard disclosure statement. It'll be in the preliminary title report that there's a private transfer tax. So when someone asks you what's the private transfer tax, you just need to know that it's a private, it goes to someone private. So it's not helping the community, not helping anything else. It's going to someone's pocket. 8 and 9 are blank. If there's anything that you would add to it, that's fine. If you want to, you can leave it blank. Paragraph 10 talks about the home protection plan. And this talks about who's going to be paying for it, not to exceed number, and issued by, I usually put down buyer's choice, because it's going to be a problem when the buyer buys the property, they're the owners. It probably pays to have the relationship with the home protection plan that the buyer has or the buyer's agent has than what the seller or seller's agent has. Who benefits with this home protection plan?
Everybody.
Buyer, seller,
Agents.
agents. That's the biggest one, because timing is everything. Dishwasher goes the day day of close of escrow. Buyer's accusing the seller of they knew this, and it becomes a, becomes a shouting match. Hey, Mr. Buyer, call this $80 deductible, call this number, and they'll fix it or replace it. So it also has some boxes for upgrades, including air conditioner, pool, spa, or other. So you either have to check the box that someone's paying for it, or the buyer waives it. Now, just because the buyer waives the plan, they can still get it later on if they wanted to. Okay, let's stop.
Difference for our insurance.
Yeah, it's a factor. The more the higher the percentage of our transactions that have a home protection plan, the less expensive our E&O is. Because think about it, most problems start at a pretty low number. It gets magnified when attorneys get involved, and a $1,000 problem turns into a $50,000 problem. $5,000 problem turns into a $100,000 problem. So the E&O carriers love to have the insurance also, and we'll close it off there and pick up tomorrow. But is the insurance worth it? Is it good? I mean, it's the biggest waste of money if you never use it, but it's the best thing since sliced bread if you need it. It's like any insurance, right? And you know what? It is worth every penny from our standpoint,
Yes.
because it keeps us out of trouble.
Just 1 year.
Yeah.
You don't know the condition of his house.
And the buyer can renew it every year if they want.
What do we
All right.
need to do after that?
All right, so we stopped at number 8. We'll continue on number 8 tomorrow, 1:30 to 3:30. Bring some questions if there's anything that was covered today that you have questions on, bring it tomorrow. Bring some questions tomorrow. The more questions you ask, the better it'll be for all of us. Okay? Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Mike. Thank you.
Just hit your meeting, it should be good.
Can't find it. Let me get out and stop the share.
Oh, yeah.
Got it.